Hi, I'm Hayley Victoria and welcome back to my Crime and Policing channel. In today's session, we are looking at the Human Rights Act. Yes. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, boring. However, the Human Rights Act is not boring. It's actually super interesting and really important. If you are watching this video because you want to be a police officer one day, or perhaps you're studying, hi, my guys, if you're my students watching this, hi. If not, hi anyway. So we are looking at the Human Rights Act, and it is important if you want to go into criminal justice field as work. Or if you think, actually no, I think my rights might be violated or interfered with, this could be an interesting video where you get the information that you need to go a little step further in your own mission. Okay, so like I said, we're looking at the Human Rights Act 1998. Now, there are schedules and all sorts of things in this act. What we're going to look at is Schedule 1, and we're going to look at the articles within there. Now, you're going to think she's missed some numbers here. There are some missing numbers. Article 1 and Article 13 are both missing, and that is because when it transferred from the European Convention of Human Rights, it just slotted in where it did. According to Blackstone's Policing, that's where I got that from. So yeah, we're going to look at these right now. Now then, there are 3 different categories we're going to look at, and that will help us as we go through each one. Now, you might think some of these rights I'm going to talk about, you might be like, actually, that's just as important as a different one. But let's go through it, and hopefully by the end of the video, it will make sense. There are certain times when your rights will be interfered with, potentially in your life. If you may be detained by a police officer or someone for a short period of time while they conduct their inquiries, etc., or arrest you, who knows? So when they're going through certain things, they're actually engaging your human rights. But there's a reason for this, and sometimes it's allowed. In fact, usually it's allowed. So let's go through it together. Okay, there are 3 different categories. There are absolute rights, your limited rights, and your qualified rights. Now, your absolute rights are this is your right, human right, absolutely. There is generally no exception to this rule. Okay, so it's an absolute right. And that would be, for example, Article 2, which is the right to life. You have a right to be alive. Nobody, usually, has the right to take your life away from you. Now, there will be circumstances, obviously, a very, very, very tiny circumstance where that might be engaged otherwise. However, Article 2, absolute right, your right to life. So this is a good one, right? So if you're out and about, you can't just get killed by someone because you have a right to life. Okay, Article 2, absolute right. There are things as well called limited rights, and that's where potentially, well, a lot of the time, if you're in policing, you'll be engaging people's limited rights. This could be Article 5, which is the right to liberty, which is a limited right, and that is engaged or interfered with if you are detained for arrest, for example, but you've still got a right to security. So yes, you might have had your liberty taken away because you've been arrested and detained. However, you're still going to be looked after. They're not just going to keep you, take away your freedom because you are taken away, you are detained for a while things are going on. You might be put in prison, something like that, who knows? So your liberty's been taken away, but your security is still there. Okay, there's also qualified rights. Now, your qualified rights are your other ones, basically, and that's where generally these rights are upheld unless, for example, it engages a different human right. So if this right is affecting someone's absolute right, this right will be taken away. And also to protect law and order, not prevent law and order, to maintain law and order, to act in the public interest. So if something that's happening might be upsetting other things, then obviously that is a qualified right as well. But I'll go through what they all are and it will hopefully make sense. Okay, let's look at the articles. So like I said, Article 2 is your right to life. Okay, Article 2, then the right to life. Everybody is protected by this right, and you all have the right to live, okay? Now, you can't have your life taken from you intentionally unless it's part of a sentence. So some countries have the death penalty, we don't have that in the UK. And also, here's the other thing. So you might be thinking, what about this? Yes, I know what you're thinking. If someone's life is lost through the absolute necessary use of force, by lawful use of force, say a police officer protecting somebody or preventing someone from running away or from arrest or whatever, and it's absolute necessary force, by the way. I'm not just saying that police officers can go around smashing people up just because they've arrested them. That's not what I'm saying at all. if the death happens and is absolutely necessary, use of force is used, which have got lots of things to fill out, lots of tools they use to make those decisions. If that happens, then it doesn't contravene this right, if that makes sense. So if you've got a police officer who shoots somebody because they are threatening to kill a lot more people or whatever, it's immediate danger is going to happen right now, that's the only use of force you can do realistically, and you've used all your NDM, all this kind of stuff, and that is the only action left to take, then that's okay. Okay, so don't shoot me about this is just a law, okay? I might be like, what? But that is what it is. Article 2, right to life. So unless you've got death sentence in your country, we don't have that. And like I said, absolutely necessary use of force. Lives might be taken, and then it wouldn't be okay, but that would be a result of the other things I've just mentioned. Article 3 is another absolute right, and that is the prohibition of torture. So nobody should be subjected to inhumane, degrading treatment. Absolute right, no torture. Cool. Our next one, Article 4, is another absolute right, and that is the prohibition of slavery and forced labour. This is massive, right? So if you think about the current climate in criminology and criminal justice, we've got a lot of people who are being trafficked and are being forced to work. They're being exploited, criminally exploited, to work for nothing. They're being, a lot of the time, transported to places. They call it modern slavery, but there's absolutely nothing modern about slavery. They'll transport people to places, they'll take away passports or whatever, other freedoms they have, Article 5, and they will make them work for free. It's awful, awful situations. Or say they owe them a debt and things like that. It's terrible, terrible business. But yes, Article 4 is an absolute right, and that is the prohibition of slavery and forced labour. Very good. I hope you can all agree that yes, Article 4 should be an absolute right. Now, Article 5, I've already mentioned this one. This is a limited right. This is the right to liberty. And as I mentioned already, this can sometimes be engaged, well, it is engaged a lot actually, I say sometimes, if a police officer is doing their duties and they detain you for whatever purpose it is, they arrest you, you're taking your liberty away. But as I've already mentioned, the security is still there. So yes, you might have your liberty taken away, but you're not just being kept locked somewhere. Okay, there you go. Article 5. Article 6 is a right to a fair trial. Now, this is also classed as a limited right. You all have the right to a fair trial, of course you do. However, there are also people who can gain access to these courts and to watch it, such as the press, etc. So Article 6, the right to a fair trial, you all have this as well. Okay. Article 7 is an absolute right. I feel like this one should be higher up the list, but Article 7 is no punishment without law. This is a good one, right? So if you are savvy and you know your laws and you know police practice, etc., you know what police officers, and you, if you're police officers watching this or trainees, you have to get this right. If you are doing things in your course of your duties, you have to do it lawfully. And there's no punishment, Article 7, without law. If you are acting unlawfully in your duties, and you are, say, being punitive towards people, there's no law to protect that, you're engaging this right. So Article 7, no punishment without law. Everything you do must be lawful, always. If you are a police officer or trainee watching this, your code of ethics and your NDM will help you here, okay? So make sure you read up on those as well. Article 8 is a qualified right. Now, I think this is our first qualified right on the list. And this is a right to a private and family life. This is one of my favourites. You all have a right to a private life. I know a lot of people sign these away and put everything they do on social media. However, you've got a right to a private life. Isn't that great? Just do what you like, as long as it's not immoral or unlawful or doing anything to upset anybody else's human rights. You're all right. Do what you like. You can have relationships with who you like, unless it's got to be consensual and legal. Remember that. You can have relationships with who you like. You can talk to who you like. Your correspondence is your correspondence, unless, like I say, it's unlawful, immoral, and affects other people or promotes disorder and crime. You know the stuff. But largely, got a right to a private and family life. Isn't that nice? Do what you like. Yeah. Have fun, guys. Just safe and lawful. Article 9 is also a qualified right, and that is freedom of thought, conscience and religion. Now, this comes up quite a lot, and it's used a lot in conjunction with other ones, which, like Article 11, which I'll come to in a minute, when things like protests are planned, like peaceful protests, because they've got a right to do this. So you've got a right to have your own thoughts, conscience and religion, like it says. You've also got a right to change it. So you've got a right to be whatever religion you like. There you go, do what you like. You've got a right to think whatever you like. You've got a right to, have your own conscience. You've got a right to all of these things. However, it's a qualified right, which means that if anything you are doing is in contravention of the other rights, it's going to be questioned. Remember, we've got a democratic society, and in the best interest of other people within that society, if your thoughts, beliefs, etc. are being presented in a way which upsets others, that's not all right. But you've got a right to think what you like, okay? Article 10 is another one which slots nicely into this one, which is your freedom of expression. So this comes up a lot as well, as you can imagine. 9, 10, 11 kind of go together. Freedom of expression. So you've got a right to express things. However, it's qualified right. And if your expression is affecting law and order, if it's affecting other people, if it's immoral, if it's offensive, obviously you've not got a right to go offending people here, there and everywhere. You know, if it's racist or bigoted, etc., you've not got a right to be outwardly committing hate crimes, if you know what I mean. Okay, so you've got a freedom of expression, and by all means everyone can express what they feel. However, if that goes against national security or morals or law, obviously you've not got a right to that. When you think about morals, we've got a thing called societal contract. You might have heard me talk about that before. We all know what's right and wrong in society. We know that if you wandered down the high street somewhere with a massive flag with a swastika on it, you're going to offend people. We know this. We know that is wrong, okay? Because it will offend people. If you've got one tucked away in your drawer in your house somewhere, it's up to you, innit? But if you're out there expressing hate, you're going to get penalised for it, because you spreading hate is likely to cause disorder and it's going to offend people. You know, you've got a right to have an expression. You don't have a right to upset others, if that makes sense. You've not got a right to infringe other people's human rights. So there you go. Article 11 is your right to assemble, right of assembly. Freedom of assembly and association, which is Article 11, the official words there. So you've got a right to assemble, and peaceful protest is the word here that we use, is your Article 11. You have that for peaceful protests. It doesn't give you a right to assemble and associate with people if you're going to go and smash up buildings and set fire to them. So the horrible riots that were in Rotherham in 2024, for example, were horrendous. That is not a good use of Article 11. Okay, peaceful protests happen all the time, that is fine. But when it starts getting violent, it's not fine. Article 12 is a right to marry. Yay! If you are so inclined. Article 12 is a right to marry. That's a limited right. So there are lots of debate about this. So you've got a right to marry. And I'm going to read this straight from the law pages, so you don't have a go at me. Men and women of marriageable age have the right to marry and found a family according to the national laws governing the exercise of this right. That's exactly from legislation.gov.uk. Okay. Article 14 is a prohibition of discrimination, which is a limited right. So that's all of our rights and the reasons behind them. Now, as I mentioned, sometimes these go hand in hand. So 9, 10 and 11, your faith, thought, conscious, assemble, expression tend to come a lot together when we have things like peaceful protests, etc. Obviously, you've got your other rights as well. Like I mentioned, the big ones that you're going to look at in the police are always Article 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. Lots of different rights intertwine what you're going to do. The most important thing is that you know them, that you know the rights, you know your rights, and that you make sure you don't engage other people's human rights unless you're lawfully allowed to do so. So be smart, be mindful about it, and look after people. You know, with great power comes great responsibility or something. I think that might be a Batman quote. But there you go. There's your Human Rights Act. So stay safe, look after yourselves, look after each other, and please don't commit any crimes.